Getting hardest is the farthest. Getting hardest is the farthest part. Yep, that's where we're starting today. Getting started is the hardest part. I need vocal warm-ups. Getting started is the hardest part. Getting hearted is the smartest fart. All right, with that, let's get started. Let's actually make that the beginning. That'll be the beginning of the episode. Me trying to say a single sentence and not getting 20%, 30% of the words even close. This is a follow-up to a previous story. We had a story, it was a guy, and he was making noise in his house. Now, this is actually a story that comes up every couple of years in Japan, sort of neighbor harassment kind of issues. It becomes very difficult because the cops don't really want to get involved because this is like not necessarily domestic, but it's very similar. It's like a dispute between neighbors. You guys should just work it out yourselves. That's what they want to say. This man would walk up and down the streets, and other people would be there, and he would shout, "Come out if you have a problem." And so he's standing on the street shouting at your house saying, "Come out if you have a problem." If you came out and you said, "I have a problem with you shouting at my house," he would then say, "I'm just muttering to myself. Why are you talking to me, idiot?" And then as you walk down the street, he would go, "Shut up, idiot." So, this is the kind of level of intercourse. Oh, the level of intercourse, the level of discourse. I guess the level of intercourse is still technically acceptable, but I think it's come to have a different meaning than that word of just interacting with each other. Let's take that sentence again. This is the level of discourse we can expect from this man. He tended to start playing nationalistic military-style music at very high volume starting around 6 a.m. So I wake up around 7. This would be the next door to my house, 6 a.m. This very military-style, almost march-style music that's very nationalistic in Japan. He was playing that as loud as he could to try to disrupt the neighbors. So there's a question of, what do you hope to achieve? It's not like all your neighbors are going to move away. So I always have the what do you want to achieve question in the back of my mind. Who are you going after? What do you think the result of this is going to be? I guess he thinks he can annoy people enough that they'll move away, and then he'll just have like a surrounding area of houses that are just empty and sort of a circle around him, a circumference of his town. But of course, that's not really what's going to happen. They start calling the police. The police don't do much. So the news comes out because they hear about this guy. MBS is a news station. They find him and they speak to him directly. He said that he's trying to raise awareness of police not cracking down on traffic violations, and him shouting and playing music and being disruptive is a form of protest, which is a very interesting take on what he's doing, because he's never at any point during the shouting actually talked about traffic violations or the police. He's never at any point done anything other than call people stupid. So somehow calling people stupid is supposed to raise awareness of traffic violations. So I think we can see that's just like a cover he came up with in the moment when the news came to speak to him. He doesn't actually own this house. This is a house owned by a relative where he stays. Now, they don't say whether he's paying rent. They don't say what kind of arrangement they have. But legally, this is not his house, but he has lived there, and people who live in places have a certain amount of rights. Because of the complaints, because of the constant complaints, the landlord, his relative, has decided to kick him out of the house. The guy, of course, doesn't want to leave. He gets him formally evicted, and he has to go to complaints court. The lower court actually dismissed this case, which is very interesting because this guy owns the house. He's saying, "I don't want this guy living in my house anymore." And the court's like, "Nah, you got to let him live there." So I don't know if this is because of a rental agreement kind of dispute, or if this is because he's letting them live there for free. And they're like, well, now this is his place of residence. You can't just kick him out like that. But then it goes to the Osaka higher court, and they overturned the lower court. So the first decision was overturned, and they're saying, get the fuck out. They are saying he violated the usage agreement by making it a base for nuisance behavior. So they're saying because the agreement is you live in this house. Now, living in this house doesn't include harassing your neighbors. So once you start harassing your neighbors and you create sort of a base of operations for a harassment campaign, that's outside of the agreement you've made with your relative who's letting you rent the house. So you now have to vacate the house. No timeline on when he has to vacate. Now, I know in North America, it's usually 30 days. Japan can be quite strict. I wouldn't be surprised if he's kicked out in a week or two. I am going to try to follow up to see if he's kicked out, but now this is going to be off the record. So where he moves to next is going to be private information. I think that's going to be very hard to find. Prime Minister Ishiba is in Gunma, and I think there's some advice should be given to just Japanese politicians. Like, just don't make comments. Don't lean into any stereotypes. Don't make comments about women or groups or anything, because you always mess it up. I think because there are stereotypes, politicians think it's okay to play into those stereotypes and make these comments, when the fact is, because it's a stereotype, people can get angry about it, and that'll ruin your reputation. And this is what they're trying to protect. And it's a very common story, and it's always these guys. Ishiba hasn't made that many. He's done some gross stuff. I do remember, like, early in his career, he took a whole onigiri and shoved it in his mouth, and that was really gross to look at. But overall, he himself has been very gaffe-free, comparatively speaking. He's still got a bunch, and this is the problem, because gaffe-free in Japan means you've only made one or two, not zero. The old Japanese men need to stay away from any comments about women in general. So he was in Gunma. Now, Gunma has a stereotype that the women are the strength, the foundation, the leader of the family. So Gunma women are strong women. And this is supposed to come from back when Gunma primarily produced silk, and they sort of led the business, I think, because it was silk, so it was sort of a female-oriented thing. I don't even know if that's true. Again, this is the stereotype, and this is where the stereotype came from. I don't know how much of that is actually true, but maybe they were sort of generally business leaders in these communities. So they took on a harder stance compared to the traditional image of a Japanese woman. He's at a meeting with local business leaders. So I'm going to go ahead and guess that most of the local business leaders were also old Japanese men. So he's in his comfort zone. He's like, I can say what I want. These guys are cool. Totally forgets that there's media there paying attention to what's going on. He said when he's in Gunma, he feels that Gunma is a place with many scary people. I sort of cringe at women because of their strong image. So I think saying that I cringe at women because they're so strong isn't the best political statement you can make, because every statement the prime minister makes is a political statement. Of course, a lot of people are like, why did you say that? That's a really awful thing to say. Why are you saying you cringe at women in Gunma? That's pretty He's playing into the stereotype, probably trying to appease the Gunma men who are all like, ho, ho, ho. Yes, our women are strong. We are henpecked men. Ho, ho, ho. This is like playing into the stereotype of all Irish people are alcoholic, which is true. So, of course, the next day he gets confronted about this statement that he cringes in front of Gunma women because they're so strong. And he tries to clarify his statement by saying, I meant women are very strong-willed and supportive of local communities. I think if I was going to analyze the two statements, I cringe in front of Gunma women because they're so strong doesn't feel like the same statement as women are strong-willed and supportive of local communities. So he's got the right idea. He's trying to turn this into like their strength is the pillar of the community. If he had stuck with that from the beginning, I don't think there would be any problem. Be like, there's a stereotype that women in Gunma are strong, and I think they are the pillar that holds up this whole community, and I commend them. That's the statement that wouldn't have gotten him in trouble. He'd be like using the stereotype to make a compliment. But he's like, nah, I see a good woman and I like cringe down and become the smallest I can because I'm afraid she's going to beat me up. Just don't say it. There was a very interesting event I learned about this week, and it was an event designed to help middle-aged men, so people in their 40s and 50s, to take better selfies for dating apps. And I was like, God damn. That actually is really useful. So as a man in my 50s myself, if you said, hey, Chunk with Beef Chest, take a good selfie, it wouldn't happen. I would take the selfie, but it would just be completely wrong. Like the atmosphere, the feeling, the actual how to use the camera, all wrong altogether all the time. This event was held for 8 single men in their 40s and 50s. And some of the advice they were given. So this was really good advice for me. It was don't use yellow light because that'll make you look washed out and sort of sickly and awful. I actually use a lot of yellow light in my room. When I'm streaming and it's dark and I have my light on, it's yellow to try to create a soft atmosphere. But at least in that case, I'm just a little image down in the corner. And so it doesn't really impact. And I'm not really going for sex appeal, if I'm being really honest, when we're doing Ninja News Japan or streaming or anything else. I think that's very evident. But that is good advice. You shouldn't use yellow lighting. I did learn that if you use red lighting, you don't see blemishes because blemishes on human skin tend to be reddish. So if you use red lighting, it flushes it out and you just look like you have perfect skin all the time. So I might actually start going for red lighting in my room when I actually start recording. Men of that age don't tend to smile much, which means their smiles are weird and unnatural. So when they take a picture of themselves, they don't have a good smile. So that's actually really good advice. So I guess you have to learn how to smile. I actually don't know if I could do it naturally in a selfie myself. Use the outer camera, not the inner camera, not like the actual selfie camera. If you're watching the YouTube video, might notice a quality change from last week's where I switched from the webcam to my cell phone camera. So I've actually hooked my cell phone camera up to my computer to act as my webcam just to see if there was a difference, primarily inspired by this story. And I was just trying stuff out last week. So if you notice the quality difference and it makes you happy, well, great, because I might be just going forward with this. I did notice like a resolution improvement. That's not necessarily an improvement on the picture that you're actually seeing. Sometimes some of us could actually use a little bit of fuzz and distance and maybe a little more pixelization would go a long way. And the best piece of advice that I really enjoyed was undo one more button, just to look a little more casual. And it seemed like they had their buttons up all the way, or maybe just the top button undone, and their shirts looked a little wrinkly and they were a little tight. And they were like, just loosen that up, baby. Just show that you're a casual guy out to have a good time, and maybe those ladies will start flocking to you. This was organized by an app for middle-aged people, and it makes perfect sense, and I think that's actually a really good idea. It's too bad it's only 8. I think this kind of information, maybe throw it out there on the internet. You'd actually probably get more traction that way. 8 people were arrested for running a fake fortune-telling site. Now, the site was real, and the fortune-telling wasn't real. So why is this one being attacked? Because I get horoscopes and stuff where I see I'll go on TikTok and it'll give me like tarot card readings will just come up randomly. And if you actually watch one, because I did watch one out of interest, it meant like the next week, all I got was tarot card readings every like 5th video, which I do not want because I do not believe in tarot card. I just was interested in what it would say about today or this week. So I could compare statistically reality. Did it happen? It did not. I did enjoy the video. That was nice. What is wrong with this website and these 8 people that they actually ended up getting arrested for it? Well, it turns out they had basically scammed 10 people out of at least 50 million yen, probably more. And the fortunes were incredibly specific and real and aimed at sort of keeping you locked in. So they would have fortunes like you will definitely win the lottery today. Now, if I said you will have the lottery in your future, and then you go buy lottery tickets, that's fairly true. It's innocuous. It's not actually saying like you have to buy a lottery ticket. They were locking in with like today this will happen. And so that's fraud. That's lying to people. And that's the problem with this service. It was the specificity of the claims and the fact that they could basically be proven unreal in a couple of seconds, but they were demanding money for it. So if you got money and you spent more money, you get more fortunes. And I bet those fortunes actually got better depending on how much money you actually sent them, with repeated attempts to get money from people. So they actually received 350 payments from one person alone. So this means they've been taking money, week after week from the same people. That becomes fraud. That becomes a scam because you're not delivering on any of the promises. You're not actually delivering on anything you claim to be doing. So in 2024, there were 12,170 arrests of foreign people. This is the largest number of arrests in the last 15 years. So I actually do have a question of what happened in 2009 to be getting more arrests than they have now. But this means more and more foreigners being arrested. Right now, they have a thing where if you get arrested and you're a foreigner, they try to get an interpreter in to actually do translation services for you. So let's say I get arrested and I don't speak any Japanese, and my Japanese isn't actually good enough to defend myself. So I would want an interpreter with me. The police ask me questions. The interpreter is there. I speak to the interpreter. They respond to the police officer. That service is there for people who don't speak Japanese, but they don't have enough interpreters. And with more people becoming sort of residents in Japan from more countries, it means there are actually more languages to interpret. They essentially cannot promise having an in-person interpreter available during questioning. And on top of the 12,000 arrests, there were 9,500 crimes with non-arrest outcomes, which means people were taken in and questioned and spoken to, but they weren't actually arrested, but they needed interpreters as well. So going forward, interpreting may be off-site, so they might do it through a phone call, via voice chat, via some sort of service like Line online, so a video call, something like that. There are currently 4,200 police in Japan who speak another language proficiently, so proficiently enough to be able to switch languages and actually speak to them. I'm going to go ahead and bet a majority of those are actually English, but there's going to be a lot of them who speak Korean or Chinese or something like that. As an English speaker, I wouldn't want the policeman who wants to arrest me actually doing the interpretation. So I wouldn't want the guy who wants to close this case as quickly as possible actually doing the interpretation for me as the suspected party, because I feel like might be a bias there. There are 9,600 civilian interpreters if needed. And this is going to be starting July 1st. So these people, I guess they're on call. So like you just hang around, maybe a work from home situation where you're on call, and then the police call you and they're like, hey, now can you jump into this meeting? Can you jump into this video call and actually do the interpretation for the police? Because maybe, you have someone from Nepal who's been arrested and you need a Nepalese speaker to do the interpretation. You're not maybe have one in your small city. So in the small city I live in, maybe there are no people from Nepal who can actually do interpretation services. So they're going to have to call someone in Tokyo, Osaka, one of the other cities, and have them actually do it via video call. 4 people were arrested for selling mammoth tusks. The biggest problem with that being, since mammoths have been extinct for a really long time, they're not mammoth tusks. So it would have been one interesting thing like, hey, I'm selling mammoth tusks. And you would take a moment and go, where did you get these mammoth tusks from? Might be the first question. This, of course, was a scam. This was to avoid ivory restrictions and sales, which is a very real thing. Selling ivory is not that evil. Not that evil. There's a weird Freudian slip because I actually think it is evil. Selling ivory is not legal. There are a lot of sort of things that you have to take into account before you can sell ivory in Japan. It's a violation of the misleading labeling of goods. So because they're selling ivory, but labeling it as mammoth tusks, that is what makes it illegal. Not the fact that they're selling illegal ivory. That is a secondary charge that's probably going to come out when they discover what they were actually selling, when they actually discover where the ivory actually came from. There is an international ban on ivory trade. So the fact that they're actually selling ivory and calling it mammoth tusks, that's going to be 2 crimes. But they have to like open the door with the fraud mammoth tusk thing and then go, hey, where did you get this ivory you were labeling as mammoth tusks? And then, of course, they're going to find out they're going to get in trouble for that as well. In Japan, you could sell legally obtained tusks certified by a state-backed organization. So I'm assuming state-backed means a Japanese state-backed, which mammoth tusks do not have an organization in the state that's going to like certify that it's a real mammoth tusks, again, because that's not a thing. So these people were just trying to get around the sale. So it means they're actually buying from an illegal source. There's no oversight, which means this is going to be huge charges, big problems. Don't buy mammoth tusks online. I mean, honestly, don't buy mammoth tusks in person either. Just a little secondary note that came into my head after I said that. There was a Kick streamer called Zokun, and he was arrested for prefectural nuisance disorder. So basically, he's running around making a nuisance of himself. What's he doing? Well, he's a Kick streamer. That's already one of the first problems because all the nuisance streamers got kicked off Twitch. They all moved to Kick where it's a little more freeform and they're getting in trouble. So Johnny Somali was a Kick streamer. That guy who went to the Philippines was a Kick streamer. All these sort of nuisance streamers have gone to Kick. I am dual streaming on Twitch and Kick, but I am not a nuisance streamer. At least I hope I'm not annoying you or anyone else in my community. I'm certainly not going outside shouting things at people and playing militaristic music at 6 o'clock in the morning. What he did to break the nuisance law was run around with women's underwear on his head. Now, the thing is, on television, this would be peak comedy. So he's seen this. There's a character, a manga character, and he wears underwear on his head. I'm not going to get into that. But a Japanese comedian on TV wearing women's underwear on his face, on his head, that actually would be seen as really funny. I guess it's because you have the option of turning it off. So if I'm walking down the street and someone runs up to me with underwear on their head, I can't just turn the channel and then like not see it anymore. I have to see that. So it's being forced on me in real life. That's why it becomes nuisance streaming. Viewers contacted the police, and because they could tell where he was, they could identify the location. They could actually send the police to where he was. So I think it's one of those interesting things where if you're streaming to people and those people are ratting you out, you either haven't found the right audience or you're not doing a very good job with your streaming. There were some defenders who kind of had the same logic of what I had, is like, if someone did this on TV, if a famous comedian did this on TV, they would actually be lauded as hilarious. What is the problem with this guy doing it? Because he's actually not doing anything particularly illegal. He's just annoying people. But I'm actually kind of in favor of nuisance laws because these nuisance streamers are getting so out of hand. This is back from May 26, but I missed the story and I actually was really interested. We've actually done a dueling story before. So Japan has a long history of samurai, and samurais have duels. And that's why cowboy movies and samurai movies have those like great standoffs, because everyone loves a duel. Well, these two Saitama women, 19 and 16 years old, so women is actually generous. These are kids. These two Saitama kids were arrested for dueling on May 26. Now, they're both from different gangs. And the different gangs, one called the other one out. She said, like, come meet me here. She summoned her. It's like, meet me here and we're going to duke it out. We're going to fight. And they were going to have a fist fight. So I guess they had clean rules. No knives, no other objects, nothing. We're just going to like duke it out old-fashioned style. They didn't bring swords, so it wasn't like a samurai duel. Between 8:30 and 9, there were witnesses. I guess they did this in a parking lot or something. Witnesses to the duel. So they're like calling the police going like, hey, we got two like gang looking chicks out here. They seem to be like either getting ready or beating each other up right now. So maybe the cops should get out here. Cops show up pretty quick. They get arrested. Both admitted to the charges of dueling. Now, why is this dueling and not just assault or fighting in the street or public nuisance like every other story we've had today? It's because it was organized. And this was the point I brought up the last time this came up in Ninja News Japan, was the organizational element is what makes it a duel, not just like an assault or a fight, or actually a lesser charge, because dueling is a more serious charge than just fighting or assault because of that organization factor, because of that forethought that went into it. Now, the police want a dueling charge because anyone involved in organizing the duel is also guilty. So if I organize it, so I call one girl on behalf of the other girl, I am now involved in the duel and I can be charged. If other people show up and they like stand in a circle around it because they know it's a duel, they know what's going on, they can all be charged with the duel. So the police are actually looking for a way to extend the crime, to catch more members of this gang, to maybe either break up the gang or give them a little pressure so they maybe rethink that gang life isn't the way they want to live. But at the same time, duels are still really cool.